I hope I don't dox myself by sharing this, but I'm a graffiti artist, or, as some might see it, a delinquent. I'm fine with either title. The point is, I enjoy spray painting, and I'm pretty good with a can in hand. Unfortunately, the tagging community is terrible. People aren't friendly, and there's a lack of respect among artists. Because of this, I've adopted a more inconspicuous routine. I prefer tagging quieter spots where my art is less likely to be seen by other artists or the general public. Old train lines are usually a good option since train cars are endless, and new trains often get decommissioned and left to rust. My friend Lucas likes to join me when I tag, even though he's not particularly into it himself. I appreciate the company. Some people don't understand the value of a good friend, and I find that sad. Most of my other friends don't seem to respect my time or interests as much as he does. One evening, Lucas and I found ourselves smoking on some nameless stretch of old tracks I had discovered earlier that day on Google Maps. I'm not a big stoner, but since he smokes a lot of weed, I often indulge to match his vibe. It wasn't too late, maybe just past 10 p.m. After finishing a joint, we started talking as we walked alongside an old, rusty freight train. Strangely, there wasn't a single tag on the entire train. It must have been recently moved here, I thought, excited at the prospect of getting first dibs on such a good surface. I tossed Lucas a can to mess around with while I started on my own tags. About 5 minutes later, I completed my first tag and admired it before moving to the next car. After about 15 minutes and 2 paint cans, I had 3 decent tags up next to each other, and I was proud of how they looked together. I must apologize in advance if this offends anyone, but I tend to discard my empty cans wherever they run dry. I flung them back the way we had come, enjoying the satisfying clatter of the ball bearings bouncing around inside the empty cans. I then caught up with Lucas, who had seemingly rolled and lit another joint, neglecting the paint I had given him. For context, the reason I'm not a big stoner is that I started experiencing unbearable anxiety highs much more frequently, about 90% of the time. In hindsight, smoking 2 joints with Lucas was a questionable decision, especially since we were already doing something illegal, which was anxiety-inducing in itself. Still, I smoked the second joint, confident that I'd be okay. That's when we heard it. A muffled clang from somewhere behind us echoed into the night. We froze, staring into the darkness. I felt droplets of sweat forming around my neck as adrenaline coursed through me. I couldn't tell if the sound came from outside the train or from inside one of the cars. It was hard to determine which option was worse. After a full minute of silence, I whipped out my phone and recorded a video. As the video shows, whoever made that noise picked up one of my empty paint cans and threw it at us before chasing and shouting at us. You can't quite see the paint can in the video, but I swear that's what the first sound was. As we frantically made our escape, whoever was behind us yelled, "You better not trip, boy!" Seconds later, a gunshot rang out behind us, nearly causing Lucas to trip and fall. It startled me so much that my fingers slipped off the record button on Snapchat, cutting the video short. We bolted down the tracks until they intersected a main road and didn't stop running until we felt safe. I don't think I've ever been more terrified in my life, especially since I was high. My hands were literally shaking, and so were Lucas's. We found our way back to the car and drove home in silence. What was I supposed to do? Call the police? I was literally breaking the law, so that wasn't an option. The story doesn't end there, though. A few weeks later, I returned to those tracks, this time during the day and armed with my trusty Glock 17. To my surprise, the train was still there. However, there was a glaring difference. The 3 spots where my tags had been were now ugly blotches of red paint. Someone had deliberately covered my work. Quietly, I kept investigating until I came across a train car with its door wide open. Inside, I found it bizarrely empty except for a chair in the center, and ropes and chains scattered about. Some of the ropes were wrapped around the chair's legs, while others lay on the floor. The strangest part was the overwhelming smell. It smelled like bleach. If you closed your eyes, you'd think you were in a cleaning supply closet. I can't overstate how strong the bleach odor was. It felt like the whole train car had been drenched in it. As I reached for my phone to take a picture, I thought I heard a metal clang further down the train. I could have imagined it, but I wasn't taking any chances. That was enough for me. I left as quickly as I had come. I've told many people this story, but none could rationalize the actions of that psycho in a way that makes sense. I doubt a homeless person would have access to a gun, yet I can't fathom why someone other than a homeless person would react so aggressively, or why they decided to cover my tags. The most disturbing aspect of the whole experience was the chair in the middle of the train car. I really want to return to those tracks to take a picture of what I saw, but I haven't gathered the courage. I have no idea if whoever was there that night intended to shoot us, or was merely trying to scare us. But sometimes, late at night, when it's just me and my thoughts, I can still hear that shot ringing in my ears. As I write this, it's early July. This story took place at the beginning of summer. I usually try to hang around my college town or travel to Europe during the summer to avoid going home, but that wasn't an option this time. I found myself reluctantly returning home at the beginning of summer. I just had to make it through 1 week, and then I'd be on a plane to Germany. I didn't feel like seeing any of my old friends, but I wasn't keen on staying home either. So I found myself waking up early and spending my days hiking, watching movies, or driving around aimlessly. On my last day home, I grew bored with my routine and wanted something more exciting. My friends and I used to train hop, one of the many unruly activities I had since cut out of my life. So, I thought, why not? I drove to a secluded set of tracks I knew about. Freight trains frequently passed through there, so I was sure there would be plenty of options. The tracks were surrounded by trees and various flora, which was partly why I chose them. The last thing I needed was to be caught doing something illegal after having been clean for so many years. I parked my car and walked over to the tracks. Let me describe the layout for clarity. This specific set of tracks ran through the trees before entering a tunnel. There was a small clearing on the other side of the tunnel, leading to a massive bridge over the water. My friends and I used to ride the train across the bridge, but since it was just me, I'd have no way back to my car unless I wanted to walk 10 miles. So I decided to hop on the train, ride it through the tunnel, and then hop off for a peaceful walk back to my car. I walked along the tracks and waited for a train to pass. It was probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon. After about 10 minutes of waiting, I felt the familiar vibration in the rails. I quickly ran to the side and tried my best to stay out of sight. As far as I know, freight train conductors don't care enough to report people walking along the tracks, but I didn't want to take any chances. The train passed, and I waited for a good number of cars to go by before emerging from my hiding spot. I picked a car that looked easy to reach and jogged alongside the train, as I had done 100 times before. Once I felt confident enough, I grabbed hold of the ladder and swung myself up. It was pretty easy. The train wasn't moving quickly. As the train approached the tunnel, I saw a strange flash of light up ahead. I assumed it was a spark from the train, but I had never seen anything like it before. I hoped there wasn't a loose wire or something dangerous in the tunnel, but it was too late to hop off. The train started picking up speed since the tunnel was perfectly straight, and I closed my eyes as the adrenaline rush set in. Just then, I felt a hand reach out from the darkness and grab my leg. I lost my footing and nearly slipped, but I held on tight. I screamed and kicked, but the train sped by before I could hit anything. Before I fully comprehended what had just happened, I felt another hand slap against my leg. I screamed again and scrambled up the ladder, hoping to get out of reach. My heart raced. What the hell just happened? The train exited the tunnel, and I jumped off without thinking. I waited for the train to completely pass and watched it chug over the bridge. I started pacing in the clearing, replaying the encounter in my mind. Were there really people in the tunnel? What could they possibly be doing there? Why would they try to drag me down? Then, a stark realization hit me. The only way back to my car was through the tunnel. There was no way I was walking back through there with those people inside, especially since they could see my silhouette in the dark. I sat on the ground for what felt like forever. I had no choice. I picked up a rock and started making my way through the tunnel. I knew there were 2 people in there. Of that, I was certain. But there could have been more. I had no idea. About halfway to the spot where I felt the second set of hands, I heard something. A faint clicking coming from somewhere in the tunnel. It sounded like someone clicking their tongue, but it could have been a machine. It was hard to tell. I froze. Continuing through the tunnel felt like a death sentence. I summoned my courage and pulled out my phone. "You better stay back, or I'll shoot," I threatened, my words echoing off the tunnel walls. There was a moment of silence. The clicking stopped just as quickly as it had begun. I was obviously bluffing about having a gun, but I figured it was better than walking in silence. I pulled up a video of a gunshot sound effect on YouTube, cranked up the volume, and played it. It was louder than I expected, and with the echo in the tunnel, I prayed that whoever was inside bought it. Without waiting another second, I sprinted full speed into the darkness, bracing myself for a fight. I didn't stop running until I reached the other side. By some miracle, no one tried to grab me. After emerging from the tunnel, I looked back and saw another flash from deep inside. This time, though, it subsided long enough for me to clearly see two silhouettes standing on the tracks, facing me. That was it for me. I turned to leave, but as I jogged away, I heard the most horrific screech I've ever encountered. It sounded barbaric, definitely human, but far from normal. I don't plan on ever train hopping again. Comment your scariest moments down below.